You know, much of your success as an online business, especially with guitars, will depend on your domain name. The owner of two great guitar domain names has contacted me and he has them for sale. Those two domain names are guitarbuyers.com and cashforguitars.com. Call or email them at the contact information listed on that page, and they will give you 20% off the purchase price. In addition, they'll work with you to make payments if that's what you need. Again, that's guitarbuyers.com and cashforguitars.com. Hey guys, I got something really cool going on. This is a fantastic opportunity for actually you and I to meet and for you to hear some incredibly cool music. On Tuesday, October 1st, the Nashville guitar community is putting on a tremendous show of some of the top players. Pat Bergeson is going to be there. I had him on the show. He was mentored by Chet. Andy Wood, who's like lightning dangerous, also another guy that was on the show, plays mandolin, guitar, acoustic. He's a wizard. Darren Favorite, who's also on this show, second or third generation Nashville player. Matthew Lee, he actually runs a Nashville guitar community, along with Paul Johnson and John Stazella, and he is such a tremendous player. Meg Williams, up-and-coming blues star, and Terrence Downing, solid player, rocking in Nashville as well. So it's only $15 to get into this event. Again, it's Tuesday night, October 1st. The doors open at 6 p.m. The show starts at 7. It's going to be at the Analog Room at the Hutton Hotel in Nashville, and I think that's on West End Avenue. Tons of gear giveaways from Wampler, Eminent Speakers, GuitarEFX.com, BTPA Cables, Lucky Dog Guitars, Groon Guitar Store, Morgan Amps, and Von Scow. Pre-sale tickets, go to the Nashville Community Group on Facebook, and they'll have something for you there. And they also have videos of previous performers at this show on their YouTube channel. The other really cool thing is these guys have been kind enough to invite me to be the guest MC of the event, and I will certainly love to meet you. If you listen to the show, please come up, say hello. It's going to be a great night. Tons of cool guests, really good musicians. So come on down. Show starts at 7 at the Analog Room at the Nashville Hutton Hotel. All right, I will see you Tuesday night, October 1st. Be there. Aloha. If you want to buy or sell a home or investment property and you're here in the Tampa Bay area, in Hillsborough, Pinellas, or Pasco counties, then listen up. West Florida Real Estate is a local residential real estate broker that's helped over 250 Bay Area homeowners buy and sell their properties in the last 4 years alone. If you're looking to sell, you'll want to get their free report, The 7 Biggest Mistakes Homeowners Make When Hiring a Realtor. And if you're looking to buy a property, you definitely want to get your hands on the 21 Most Expensive Mistakes Tampa Home Buyers Make When Buying a Home. Each one of these reports is going to save you time and money. Inside, you'll discover the 7 most important things to consider when hiring a realtor, what to do if you're buying and selling a home at the same time, and the danger of choosing a realtor who agrees with everything you say. To get your hands on these free reports, head on over to westfloridarealestate.com. That's westfloridarealestate.com. If you're a business owner and you want to increase your cash flow, or if you're a label or artist and you want to promote new music, then listen up. For information about advertising on Everyone Loves Guitar, including information on geographically targeted ads, go to everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. That's everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. Hey, this is Craig. If you like this show and you want to support it and you want to keep it free, head on over to everyonelovesguitar.com/support. That's everyonelovesguitar.com/support. Hey, everybody, this is Craig Garber. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar. We got a California guitar player with us today, Marko DeSantis. He is best known as the lead guitar player and co-founder of the band Sugarcult, with whom he toured worldwide and sold over 1 million records since launching out of Santa Barbara in 2001. I want to give a quick shout out to little Marko in front of the screen there.
That's it.
To Sean Daly for connecting us. Sugarcult released 3 studio records, which spawned hit radio singles such as Bouncing Off the Walls, Pretty Girl, and Memory. They also released a documentary film, a live album, and a best-of concert DVD. They headlined their own national and international tours, performing on main stages of festivals all around the world, including Glastonbury, Reading and Leeds, Summer Sonic, Warped Tour, Soundwaves. They were the main support on Green Day's American Idiot, USA, and Japan tours, and Blink 182's European Stadium Tour, and countless others. Prior to Sugarcult, Marko wrote, recorded, performed live, and toured with alternative and pop punk bands. And these pop punk alt bands have the greatest titles, man. The Ataris, the Swingin' Utters. I mean, that doesn't get better than that. The Swingin' Utters, and Nerf Herder. As an educator, Marko has and is currently appearing as guest lecturer, professor, and panelist at various colleges, music conferences, and academic programs, with an emphasis on music business, artist development, songwriting, social media, and marketing. He's based in LA, and he's taught or lectured at the following places: Musicians Institute, Los Angeles College of Music, Citrus College. That sounds like something to be down here in Florida. UCLA, Japanese exchange called Kenshu, South by Southwest, Taxi Road Rally, New Noise, Camp Jam, and Power Chord Academy. Marko, thanks for your time, man. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
And this has been like a year in the making, or something like that.
Yeah, we finally, the stars finally aligned.
Yes, sir, man. When you first started Sugarcult, what were your expectations? Did you expect, like, okay, we're going to do great, or did you even think your music would be on the radio?
Well, geez, all right. Well, I'll just lay it out for you. When I first got involved with Sugarcult, I was literally, it was probably within a couple months of me confiding in my girlfriend at the time. I was basically saying, like, you know, I've been playing in bands since I was like 13, 14 years old. And I've had bands that almost had record deals. I've had bands that got so close. And then, you know, this happened or that happened. I've been in bands and toured. And I just feel like maybe it's time to just not be so kind of, you know, just maybe now it's time to tuck my shirt in and become a grown-up, you know?
So and like you're thinking about leaving.
Yeah. Like basically stop pursuing this so hard, because it's just one heartbreak after another, one near miss after another. And I mean, interestingly, I had started out when I was a kid in my first band playing guitar, but then I had quickly, about a year or two later, joined up with some friends of mine who were great guitar players. Actually, one of them is now the guitarist of the Foo Fighters, Chris Shiflett.
Oh, wow.
We all grew up in Santa Barbara together, and Chris came up to me back then when we were just kids, you know, and we were like literally children having like sleepovers and stuff, you know, and he was like, hey, Marko, we're thinking about getting a new bass player. So I was just going to ask your blessing. Like, is it okay if we have your bass player? Because I had like the kid in the neighborhood who was just good at stuff, and I just taught him how to play bass so we could have a bass player, so we could have a band. You know, that's like the way you form bands when you were kids. Yeah. You just like go to your friend's house with a drum kit, make noise, tell your one friend who was outspoken to like scream a bunch of the teenage poetry you wrote in a microphone that, you know, we actually, full disclosure, SM58 stolen from Santa Barbara Junior High School. Yeah. I was like, dude, steal a mic from your band room and read this bad teenage poetry that I wrote when I was on summer vacation with my parents. And he's like, okay. And he just started screaming this stuff. And then we're like, shoot, we need a bass player. So I get my buddy Derek over, and I just say, watch my index finger, everything I'm doing on this guitar. Cause I was just playing, you know, bar chords, not even bar chords, just like power chords, you know, probably the root and the fifth, you know, at the most. And, I was like, watch that, and you're my bass player now. Okay. And he's like, okay. And like, he was just one of those kids, like literally within about 2 months, he was already a virtuoso on the drums, could play guitar, play circles around me on guitar, you know, and bass. I mean, it was like, you know, it kind of created a monster. He became one of the best drummers of all time. And unfortunately he's not with us anymore, but that's a whole other story. But anyways, so long story short, Chris Shiflett asked if he could have my buddy Derek Plord to play bass. And I said, absolutely not. Can't have Derek. you can have me. And he's like, but you're a guitar player. And I was like, I don't care. I want to be in a band with you and our buddy Luke, because they were such good guitar players. I figured like somehow intuitively I had that attitude where I was like, I feel like I'm doing all the heavy lifting in my band, and I want to be the guy who's catching up with the other guys that are good. So I'd rather, yeah. So I kind of just intuitively had that thing where it was like, I feel like I'm going to learn more by being the weakest player in this band than the strongest player in this band. So I joined in with Chris and switched to bass, and ended up going on that trajectory for years and years and years. And I kind of identified myself. This is where I get kicked off the guitar podcast. I kind of identified myself as a bass player for years. You know, I joined this band and that band and started another band, and then had another band and almost got a record deal, and then joined this band called the Ataris when they first came to Santa Barbara. And oddly enough, with Derek, my buddy who had taught to play bass as a drummer. Such a small world, such an incestuous pond in Santa Barbara.
I've interviewed, like, it's not a big place, Santa Barbara, is it?
It's not a big place at all, dude.
I've had like 2 or 3 people from Santa Barbara.
You can get from like where like me and your buddy Sean Daly, you can get from like the part of town we grew up to like the end of town. You know, like you can get from one side of town to the other in 10, 15 minutes driving.
Wow.
It's a small town. It's a little coastal village in between the beach and the mountains, you know? So the thing is, it's fertile soil for, you know, weirdos and dreamers, because when you're from a place like that where other people spend thousands of dollars and save up their vacations, you know, they want to go there on vacation or go there for honeymoons. When you're from there, and I don't know if people where you're from in Florida can can relate, but like you're kind of bored. When you're a kid, I think teenagers are just bored no matter what.
Yeah, that's true. But makes what you're saying, it's almost like a better town for older people, because you enjoy
newlyweds and nearly deads, they say, right? Yeah,
newlyweds and nearly deads. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, put it this way: it's a beautiful place to have just a magical childhood, you know, because it's just beautiful and there's like the ocean. But when you're a teenager, especially if you get into music, you're just like you're just fucking bored.
Yeah.
Like, you do. So you end up finding the other weirdos in town, and you know, you see people at a concert and go, hey, that guy looks weird. I'm going to go hang out with him if I see him at school or whatever. And there's this instant kinship when you're an outsider. You know, I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but you know, when you're an outsider and you're a teenager, you don't necessarily fit the mold of like the sort of typical all-American kids. You kind of just get pushed out to the margins. And in Santa Barbara, there's just not enough of any specific weirdo sect. So what would happen is we all just kind of got thrown in the same heap. So it was like punk rockers, metalheads, skaters, goth kids, hip hop kids, you know, brilliant geniuses, theater, you know, actors and actresses, artists, you know, just anyone who wasn't like just on the straight and narrow basically got thrown in the same heap. And brilliant, you know, brilliant minds, and then also total loser, like drug addicts, you know, like, so we were all kind of in the same, you know, pile together. And then you end up kind of sorting it out and going, okay, well, there's only so many places to play where like young bands can play. There's only so many people who have bass amps. There's only so many girls that are willing to date us. And so you all sort of just, it gets very incestuous, and you know each other. And then you start to kind of create this little, you know, you kind of create this little tribe of just weirdos, and it works. And then you're not thinking in our mind, just to go back to your original question, I don't think in our mind we were thinking like, well, this is going to be some vocation. I think we're really making some career moves here. It was just kind of what you did.
Just a band.
Yeah, we play music because what else are you going to do? You know, maybe we'll go to the beach, maybe we'll go to a party, hang out, you know, try to make out with somebody. But like pretty much there's nothing else to do. So you're like, let's form a band because it's fun. Not because we're going to maybe make money or become rock stars. Like that's the last thing. I can't believe that I bought this house by playing rock and roll. That's absurd.
Are you in Santa Barbara still?
No. I live in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah. But, you know, I still go to Santa Barbara.
How far is that away from you?
about 93 miles away. Yeah.
So is that like 8 hours in LA traffic? What does that mean in terms of time?
I'd say if there's no traffic, it's about an hour and a half. If there's
okay, that's cool.
About 2 hours and change, maybe. So it's not too bad.
No. Sean is from there, isn't he? Sean Daly.
Sean is, yes. Oh my God, now. You know, just growing up in a small town, you know, all the bands, we all, you know, it was never like neat edges. It was like at any given time, you were probably in more than one band, you know, like I was in, after my first band ever, which was called Illiterate, that I played guitar in. Then I joined with Chris and Luke, and that was called Lost Kittens. And we were very like...
Lost Kittens?
Yeah, with a Z at the end, as you can imagine. We were very influenced by a band from Finland called Hanoi Rocks, and probably by this movement that was happening in LA that begat Guns N' Roses. So there was all these bands bubbling up in LA. Right. There was Faster Pussycat, LA Guns, Poison, and Guns N' Roses. And to be honest with you, Guns N' Roses was probably not the one you would have assumed was going to be the biggest, because they were the weirdest and the darkest, you know? And so that was 100 miles away. Like I said, that's in LA, but we were in Santa Barbara, but we had this one little record store that had these free magazines called BAM magazine. Doesn't exist anymore. It was like a little newsprint magazine, and you could get those things for free. And basically it was like our little portal to this like secret world of untapped bands. And we would go there, just me and my friends, just a couple of us. And we would compare notes, like almost like the same part of a kid's brain that makes them obsessed with like, you know, baseball players or comic books or something like that. Like we were like that with rock stars. So it wasn't enough for us. We were so obsessed with music. It wasn't enough for us to just like the bands that were on MTV or on the radio. We had to, like, it was twofold. We had to find out, okay, what bands did those bands listen to? And go do that sort of cultural anthropology and go back and like, okay, Motley Crue said they liked Mott the Hoople and David Bowie. Okay, we got to go figure that out now. You know, whatever, Metallica, the guy in Metallica was wearing a GBH shirt and the other guy was wearing a Misfit shirt. What's that mean? And suddenly, you know, you go find the kid at your school who had like a mohawk and be like, hey, dude, make me a mixtape. I want to learn about punk rock, right? So it was like, of course, this is all pre-internet. So we had to be very imaginative. And, you know, you were limited to what you could find at the record store. And when you're a kid, you're broke. You also don't have a lot of money to go buy records. So it was a lot of taping shit for each other and turning each other on to stuff. And there's a certain like, almost like one-upmanship, like, oh, I found out about something cool and underground. So this magazine would lead us to all these really cool things, and we'd find out about Jet Boy and Faster Pussycat and LA Guns and Guns N' Roses. And right about then, around the time we were a band.
Pause 1 second. Which of those bands were you thinking was going to break, of those bands you just mentioned?
I mean, I don't know, because when you're a kid, anyone who's a grown-up and has a guitar and long hair looks like the real thing to you. So it was like, to me, it was mind blowing that they weren't already famous.
Right.
You know? And it was just like, wow, this is like a parallel universe of like rock stars that we get to have all to ourselves, because no one else knows about them at our school. You know, everyone knows about, you know, Motley Crue and Iron Maiden and all that, and Duran Duran and Depeche Mode, but like no one knows about this stuff. And so then we would kind of champion these bands, and obviously we were borrowing liberally from it for our own band, for Lost Kittens. And then, and now I'm really dating myself here, but then Appetite for Destruction came out.
Right.
Some of these bands started getting record deals. Poison got a record deal and they came out. Appetite for Destruction came out for Guns N' Roses. And you know what happened? I mean, I had their name painted on my skateboard. I was, you know, just a child, and it flopped. No one cared. We thought it was going to be the biggest thing in the world.
What, Appetite for Destruction?
Appetite for Destruction flopped when it first came out.
It really?
Yeah, go back and read about it. The first single was Welcome to the Jungle.
Right.
Kind of just misfired. Didn't really work. It wasn't until Sweet Child of Mine came out, almost a year later, that the record picked up the steam and launched them into the stratosphere and gave them what became Guns N' Roses.
Interesting, because I grew up on the East Coast, and it was pretty strong there.
Even when it first came out?
I mean, I'd be
first
lying.
Came out in 1987.
I'd be
okay.
Lying if I said I remembered exactly, but I don't remember that not doing well.
Yeah, it did not come out. When it came out, it was just kind of like, first they put out this EP called Live Like a Suicide, and we all got that. And it was supposed to be on their indie label. Like, they were supposed to have their own label. But we found out years later, after I read all the books and shit, that was like kind of a plan the label hatched to like sort of give them a little bit of street cred.
Oh, right, yeah.
You know, but anyway, long story short, that record came out and eventually it got big. And then it was kind of that weird feeling where you're like, for the first time ever, you're like, holy shit, the stuff that we thought was cool became something. That's pretty cool. And then parallel to all this, I also had a band with my friends called Section 8 that was more of a punk
Section
band.
8. For people listening who don't know what Section 8 is, Section 8 is the government's name for low-income housing, and they provide people who are just not making money with a house. And, you know, usually it's a pretty nice place. Well, it depends. It can be a pretty nice place with a hugely discounted rent, or it could be a real shithole with an even huger discounted rent. But now they've cleaned up the program. And, you know, it used to be like you could be dealing crack out of there and it didn't matter. But now you got to keep the place nice now.
Okay, so when we were kids, we called it Section 8, thinking it'd be a cool punk name because we misunderstood what Section 8 meant. We thought it meant that was the name.
Cool punk name.
If you were like in the army and you were like kicked out of the army because you were crazy.
Oh,
you know, like,
right.
You know, like someone would like.
What is that called?
I thought it was Section 8 when I was a kid, so I still don't know what the answer is. But anyway, that's what we thought it was. Like you got kicked out of the army because you're crazy. So anyway, long story short, I had these two parallel bands. One was kind of a glam band called Lost Kittens, and one was kind of like a crossover hardcore punk band called Section 8. And, you know, we were doing a whole different thing, but there was bands in our hometown. There was a band called RKL, and they were really the sort of like, they were the catalyst for everything that happened out of Santa Barbara. There would be, you know, Chris Shiflett wouldn't be in the Foo Fighters. I wouldn't have had Sugarcult. You know, Sean Daly wouldn't have done the things he did. All the stuff from Santa Barbara, Mad Caddies, Lagwagon, all these bands that came out of Santa Barbara, probably nothing would have happened had it not been for, there's probably two bands to be fair. One was RKL, which stood for Rich Kids on LSD. And they were the first band to like put out a 7-inch and then put out a full-length record. And to us, it was mind-blowing. Like, we'd go into a record store and see that record, and then, like, someone would be like, hey, that's the guy from RKL walking down the street. Like, they were probably only, like, 6, 7 years older than us, but to us, they might as well have been the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, I totally.
In our hometown. And it was like, there's this, it was the first, it was, I can't describe it to you. Hopefully I won't bore your listeners, but, like, I would go into record stores and see like RKL stickers or like see like RKL written in Sharpie on a wall somewhere. And I thought it was like some gang. I mean, I didn't even know what it was. And then eventually connected it that, oh, this is a band. And, oh, this is a band from here. There was another band like that from our hometown. It was Toad the Wet Sprocket. And
very cool. Great band.
But they were the same thing. Their singer was like 15 years old. And they had a cassette that was shrink wrapped. And that was like, to us, you might as well have like a Grammy.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
You would mass produce something and put it out yourself. And it was actually really good. Go online and look up the song Know Me by Toad the Wet Sprocket. Tell me that's not one of the best songs ever written. Written by a fucking 15-year-old without a major label. I mean, that was just an innocent little band in our hometown. So there was RKL on one side. There was Toad the Wet Sprocket happening, and that in a small town. Yeah, neither of those bands were famous yet.
So much music out of a small little place.
Yeah, and neither of those bands were famous, but in our hometown they were famous. Like in town, we could like you'd heard about them, and then when you actually met someone in the band, you were like, "No way, I'm actually talking to." You'd like tell your friends, like, "Dude, I saw the guy from RKL today, and he was nice to me at the record store," or "I saw the band from Toad the Wet Sprocket, and he was cool." It was so weird to us because we were such music fanatics. And that's what I was trying to say earlier. Like, I'm probably not really, the only reason I probably became a musician was because I was such a huge music fan that I became a musician so I could get closer to the thing I was such a fan of.
But I think that's a lot of people's story, that the music,
Sure.
yeah, this, it's kind of like almost a spiritual thing, the connection to music, and then your
Yeah, you're like, how do I get
participation.
inside this?
Yeah.
I have to get inside. I like it so much. I need to get inside it, you know?
That's really cool though, man. I think it's keeps
It's
things.
a trip. But,
Yeah,
but I mean, honestly, when kids come up to me and go, oh my God, Sugarcult, I'm like, I relate to them a lot because, you know, and to me, it's like, I always wanted us to be the kind of band that would make our fans not just like stoked, but make our fans like exceed their expectations, you know, like blow their minds. Because I remember how fun it was. I mean, I'm not going to say was in past tense. I still am a fan. You know, how fun it is to be a fan. I still get excited about shit. I'm going to see the Rolling Stones the day after tomorrow. You know, I saw them with Guns N' Roses opening in 1989. It was the first time.
Same show in New Jersey.
It was incredible. You know, and here I am seeing them again, and I'm just as excited about it. I'm more excited about it now because the only reason I cared about seeing them in 1989 was because Guns N' Roses was opening for them. Now, you know, they looked like dorks back then. They had like parachute pants and mullets. Now the Rolling Stones are like in their late 70s.
Yes.
And I'm just like, how can I not? I live pretty close to the Rose Bowl. They're playing at the Rose Bowl. I mean, how can I not go to that? You know, but I'm excited about it. Like, you know, I shouldn't be that excited about going to a rock and roll concert at this stage of my life. I'm like,
why?
I'm a married guy I'm a dad, you know what I mean? But it's like the older I get, the more of a grown-up I become. I keep thinking like, well, when this rock and roll thing kind of, you know, this rock and roll obsession wears off, that you start to kind of go, wait a minute, maybe that's just not going to happen, because I constantly get excited about music over and over.
It's a good thing, man. It's a really good thing. I mean, you got to have
way beyond rock and roll. I love all styles of music and, you know, culture. It's a trip. Yeah.
What was the best part of your success, and what was the most challenging or difficult part?
Oh yeah, the questions. Sorry, I know I'm yip yapping too much here. Best part of my success. Well, I have to kind of finish what I started in order for you to understand my answer to that question.
Okay.
I'll just fast forward through it. After being a kid and doing Lost Kittens and Section 8, and then seeing the bands in my town like RKL, and another band had come through town called No Effects, you know, those bands, you thought, well, those punk bands will never do anything because it's music for outsiders. It's total, you know. And then what happened was the 90s happened. And the 90s, it was like all of a sudden, No Effects became huge. And you're like, No Effects? Those guys used to play like little parties with generators in people's like driveways. And suddenly they were selling out shows and being a band. Like you'd see people in other countries, like they were touring. RKL started touring. They started spreading the seed and then coming home and telling us all about it. And we'd all learn and go, oh shit, how do you do that? Well, so you've got to make records, you make t-shirts. So we started learning all this stuff, and it gave permission to us. Cause like I said earlier, we were just doing music just because we're like, what else are we going to do? We're bored and it's in our neighborhood and we're just going to do it. Cause like, you know, and then it became like, that's when we started scratching our heads and going, wait a minute, there's actually a path. We can actually, we might be able to actually to like do this for reals. And then, you know, that sort of gave us all permission and inspiration to like make some phone calls. Like, well, I've got a band. We played some shows in Santa Barbara. Why don't I make some phone calls and see if we can go play in San Francisco? Maybe we can go down and play in LA. And we just started doing that. And once you do it and you have fun and people respond, then you go, oh shit, I want to do that again. You know, it's kind of like the analogy I'll give is kind of like, it's kind of like making out with somebody. When you're a kid, you're like, I'm never going to be able to ever make out with somebody. How am I ever going to find a girl who wants to kiss me? And then you do. And then you find another one. And then you find another one. And sometimes you find like 3 at once. And before you know it, there's you're like, I got that down. Something I thought was impossible is now something that's totally possible. And then you start to go, okay, wait a minute, I'm getting carried away with these makeout sessions. Let me see if I can actually sustain a relationship. and maybe take this, you know. So I think that's what happens with music. You're doing it just because it's a labor of love. And then you go like, well, that felt good. I want to do it again. And the more you do it, the more you start to get the hang of it. And you realize like, hey, I made a bunch of mistakes on my instrument, but no one arrested me. No one started frowning.
Yeah.
The world didn't end. Okay, so I guess we can make mistakes. Okay, cool. Hey, my guitar was out of tune. Or, you know, you just figure it out. You kind of, I call it flunking upwards. You just kind of like figure it out as you go. And you get better because you get fed up with being shitty, so you get better. And that's like anything. If you do anything a bunch of times, you're going to get better at it. And eventually we all got better at it. And, you know, as culture was moving on, we started seeing like the things that we kind of had in our own little secret world in our local community. We started seeing them get respect all over the world. And like bands we'd see on the way up, like Green Day playing our home, you know, they play in Santa Barbara at small little places. And then all of a sudden they get a record deal and they're on the radio. And not only are they on the radio, they're becoming like cultural icons. And we're going, holy shit, how many times are we going to see this happen? So it really kind of was a unique situation for all of us in Santa Barbara where we were like, this is totally possible. And, you know, but meanwhile, I'm, you know, forming another band. I had a band for a couple of years called Popsico that was, I think, one of the best things I was ever a part of. But our singer got involved with, you know, there's a lot of stuff in the 90s with drugs, and our singer got involved, unfortunately. He was really into Kurt Cobain from Nirvana. And, he, you know, I think he got carried away with it all. And unfortunately, he got a drug habit. And like literally, we made a record called Off to a Bad Start. And 2 weeks before that record came out on an indie label, our singer died in a car accident.
Oh my
God.
Holy shit.
2 weeks before Off to a Bad Start came out. And the cover art for Off to a Bad Start was a woman who had jumped from the Empire State Building in the 1920s and landed on top of a car, and it looked like satin sheets, and she was smashed in a car. How weird is that? So that kind of freaked me out.
It was off to a bad start.
Yeah, it freaked me out. I mean, I say it now because it's 100 years later, but like that completely like, you know, just threw me into a tailspin where I was like, I thought this was what I was going to do. This is, you know, I thought this was the one, this band, you know, it was kind of this thing I was so focused on, and then it didn't work. And then it kind of like, you know, you can get kind of heartbroken a little bit where you're like, you know, I guess it's like going back to the analogy of relationships where you're, because a band is a relationship, you know,
yeah. And
you're like, I don't really want to jump back into a situation like that again, because I don't like the feeling of that happening, of if it doesn't work, you know? So I started doing other things. I started an indie label, like a small independent label. That's how I met Sean. Actually, okay. He was like the kid in the neighborhood, and he'd come over and like help me stuff envelopes. And we just started, again, the same attitude. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out as I go. And put out, my friend was the singer of a band called Lagwagon, and he started a label, but he didn't really have the time to run it. So he came over to my house. I was actually living at my mom's house, and he came over, walked into my bedroom, and like handed me a computer and a phone and a stack of papers and said, here, dude, have a record label. You know, you seem like you know how to make phone calls and make shit happen. I got to go on tour for like next 3 months, try to make this happen. And I was like, all right. And he's like, I'll pay you this much money. I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm sitting there in my boxer shorts, like figuring out how to set up his computer. And then I start making some phone calls, and I'm like, hey, I'm Marco. I'm friends with Joey. Got this record, and started getting some action on the record. And I convinced Joey to to make a record with this band from our hometown. Actually, the drummer of Lost Kittens, he had started in a band called Nerf Herder, and they were really cool. And I was actually doing a part-time job screen printing t-shirts with Steve Sherlock from Nerf Herder. And he's like, dude, let me play you this tape I made with my buddy Perry, who's now Perry Grip. Parrygripp, who's like an internet sensation, Perry Grip. But anyway, they were starting a band called Nerf Herder just for fun. Again, small town, no one's doing this to try to make it. We're just doing it just because. And he plays me this thing, and I was like, oh, dude, that's cool, man. And I convinced Joey to make a 7-inch, which is just a 7-inch single on vinyl, you know, with like 2 songs on it. And from him working on that, he was like, you know what, if I'm going to go through the hassle of setting up drum sounds, we might as well make a full length, you know? it's cheaper to press up a CD than with 10 songs than it is to press up a 7-inch with 2 songs, you know?
Yes.
So we're like, fuck it, let's just make a CD. Made the CD. I started making phone calls. I kid you not, I got them added to 10 radio stations in America.
Wow.
One of them being the second biggest radio station in America, which is called Live 105 in San Francisco. Got nerve for that. All of a sudden, in my teenage bedroom, my phone starts ringing. People are sending me limousines and flying me to New York City, and I'm meeting with Clive Davis face to face.
And you're
Suddenly
a kid.
I'm swept in this fucking world because they're like, what the fuck? Where there's smoke, there's fire. Who the fuck is this kid? Who the fuck is this band? We got to have this record. You get a song on the radio. I didn't realize, I had no idea what radio even was about. I didn't know the game at all. It was just dumb luck. And because I got their song on the radio, they assumed and it was funny because they just assumed I was like bluffing, because I'd be like, I don't know what I'm doing. They're like, fuck, okay, he's playing hard to get, you know? And somehow I got the band. I ended up getting the band a huge major label deal in New York. And
you were how old?
I was in my 20s. I was in my early 20s.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Kind of licking my wounds after the you know, band after Popsico had collapsed.
So did you feel bad in the sense that shit, I wish I was doing this for my band?
I mean, I never really thought about that, but it did sort of like occur to me. I was like, wow, the music business isn't as intimidating as I thought it was. It's mostly just people driving by Braille. You know, it's kind of like no one knows shit. And then as soon as you stumble on something that works, suddenly you're the all-knowing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know, so that kind of was like, oh, I see how this shit is. You just got to go for it. And, you know, it's that old saying, jump and the net will appear.
Yeah.
You know? And so I just sort of had this thing. And to be honest, I was really passionate about it because, again, I identify myself mostly as a music fan, and I sincerely loved this band, and I loved this record, and I loved music. So I was like, I've got, you know, I think that was contagious, and people heard that, and they were like, dude, I want to listen to this record that this guy just told me about because he sounds like he sincerely loves it. He doesn't sound like he's at work, you know, pushing a record because that's what he's supposed to do all day, you know? And so I think that's a lesson, you know, if you do something, you know, the way you're supposed to do it, then whatever, it doesn't move the needle. You have to exceed people's expectations. You have to do it, you know, like that's what I always say to the bands I work with now. I'm like, play the shitty bar on a Tuesday night in front of 4 people. Play it as though you're playing at the Staples Center.
Yeah.
Don't conform to the bar. Make the 3 people that are at that show go home going, what the fuck were those guys doing playing at that bar? They should be on tour.
Right.
They're going to tell their friends about it. They're going to evangelize about it. Right. And then hopefully they come next time and bring 5 people each. And next time those 5 people will go home and tell their friends, so on and so forth. Right. That's really what Sugarcult did. Right from the get-go, we played in Santa Barbara, but we didn't play Santa Barbara as a Santa Barbara band. We played Santa Barbara as though we were a band like from England coming to town on tour. You know, We made it feel important. We made it feel dangerous, you know, and we made it feel fun, you know, rather than just like, there's Marco up there schlepping his gear again. You know, like we made it feel like it mattered. And that's kind of what you have to do. You do have to sort of trick yourself into believing that it matters. Otherwise, how is anyone else going to fucking believe that it matters, think that it matters, right? And then what happens, it's like self-fulfilling prophecy. If you present yourself that way, eventually people receive you that way. And before you know it, you are that way. It's really weird. So I don't want to talk too much about the history of all this, but it is kind of interesting. But I don't know if I was right or wrong, to be honest with you, Craig. But when I was doing that whole Nerf Herder thing and I got them signed to a label, I immediately, you know, I got another band that we put out. They got signed about a year later. And that's when record companies started calling me and saying, hey, who are you? Like, you keep signing bands and putting bands out that we've never heard of before that get on the radio. Do you want to stop?
Who are you? How is this happening?
And I'm like, this is fucking crazy. And to be honest, I kind of freaked out because they started offering me jobs. And I was like, holy shit, like I could like move to LA and get a place and be making real money. And I'm still pretty young. And I kind of had this like panic attack, like, holy shit, what if I do that? And then I wake up 10 years from now and I forgot to be a musician. I kind of like had this like epiphany where I was like, I don't really want, I mean, that sounds like fun, but like, I don't think that's my passion. I want to play. And so immediately I just said, thanks, but no thanks. And then I joined a punk band and went on tour in Europe for like 2 months. And that's when I did the Swingin' Utters. They needed a bass player. And I just, you know, I'd been playing with this band, the Ataris. And then I graduated to the Swingin' Utters through the same, you know, connections.
Yeah.
And I ended up in this band, and I went to Europe and I had this great time with them. And they actually asked me to join the band, but I would have had to move to San Francisco, and they already were recording their new record. So I knew it was going to be a whole album cycle before I could be really in the band. And,
right.
you know, and I had learned some advice someone gave me way back when I was still like a kid in Lost Kittens. When we were playing in LA, there was this band we connected with called Blackboard Jungle that never went anywhere, but their bass player was kind of it was almost like Nikki Sixx in Motley Crue. Like the bass player is kind of the quarterback of the band, right? Even though he's not the front man. So that their bass player, Britt, was sort of the quarterback of the band. And he said to me, he gave me this advice one day. He's just like, Marko, whatever you do, man, always try to make yourself irreplaceable. Weave yourself into a band, whether it's by being part of the songwriting or by being the person that is the face of the band or whatever it is. Like, always try to make yourself irreplaceable. And I think I intuitively kind of knew that I could sense that was a good way to go, a good approach. But once he said that to me, I think it's really weird how that, like, I just thought about that right now for the first time in like 100 years.
About making yourself irreplaceable. Sorry, by the way, if I keep diverting my attention, I have this Chrome has a weird bug and like it keeps taking me off.
Oh shit.
You. So I apologize if I'm trying to just keep this picture from.
Oh, that's okay.
Sorry.
Well, let me know if you need me to clarify or whatever.
No.
But anyways, so this guy was like, always try to make yourself irreplaceable. And it was weird advice to get from a guy who ended up not even becoming successful. But I kind of carried that with me and I was like, you know, I'm not just going to join a band. I want to be part of a band, you know? And with the Swingin' Utters, it was amazing. I was a fan of their music. They were an amazing band from San Francisco, but they weren't from my own community back home. And I felt like they had already put out like a few records. Like I felt kind of like the stepmom. Like I was like, you know, no disrespect to anyone out there who's a step parent, but like, I felt like there's, you know, people are coming up to me asking for autographs and taking pictures with me with German accents, you know, oh, we love your band, the Swingin' Utters, can you sign this? And I'm signing it. And I'm like, I didn't even fucking play on this record. I wasn't even a part of this vision. Like I'm getting credit for something that I didn't
you weren't part of the genesis of it.
Yeah. And I'm enjoying to be up there. But like, again, that's the fan in me. I'm like, fuck, I love this band so much. And I'm actually on stage playing their songs. How fascinating is that? And playing, you know, it's always fun to play a rock show, you know, playing these London, we played in Venice, Italy, we played in, you know, in Spain, we played in Poland, we literally played 48 shows in 50 days. It was one of the most incredible experiences in my life. And let me just add to that, we were sharing a tour bus in Europe, and this is like my first time ever touring. We were sharing a tour bus with another band that was on the same label, Fat Records, a band called No Use for a Name, and the guitarist of No Use for a Name was Chris Shiflett.
Dude, Chris Shiflett turns up everywhere.
Right? So before he was in the Foos, I was in No Use for a Name. So, and I hadn't seen him in years. He had moved up to San Francisco and like, you know, kind of started a new life after Lost Kittens and everything. So here's me and Chris on a tour bus together in two different bands, but in the same bus on the same tour, looking at each other going, holy fuck, dude, here we are, Lost Kittens. Somehow in some weird way, the Lost Kittens are in Europe together and we hang out all the time and go see stuff. And I mean, he's one of my dearest friends, but that was a trip, that tour. But when I came home from it, I kind of came back down and I was like, okay, that was a lot of fun. I didn't make any money. I had a lot of fun. I made great connections, learned so much, but that's not what I'm going to do. I sort of just, you know, I sort of said, that's not enough for me. Like I'd rather just do my own sort of solo thing or just do something completely different at this point rather than, you know, join someone else's thing. And then I put a caveat in there, which still stands today, by the way, if anyone's out there listening. I was like, I don't really want to join another person's band unless it's something huge, like the Foo Fighters or Weezer or something, you know, where it's like at that level, you're like, fuck it. I'd happily do something like that because it would be an incredible once in a lifetime opportunity. Funny thing is that literally happened to our buddy Chris, who you have to interview at some point. But like his story is the same kind of thing. The day is darkest before the dawn. Just when you're about to give up is when it fucking happens. And I get home from all that. I ended up doing another thing a year later with Nerf Herder of all bands. I ended up filling in on bass for them and going to Europe with them for a gig and doing some shows with them. It's the same kind of thing. It was fun. I'm there with Steve from Lost Kittens. So little by little, Lost Kittens have gotten,
Lost Kittens is like pretty prolific.
Little by little, you know. But so there's something poetic about all of this stuff. But like at the same time, I'm going, this is Stephen Perry's band. I'm here as the hired gun. It's fun, but it's ultimately a distraction. And I got home from all that, and I just kind of verbalized. At that point, I said, and I had a couple other little bands here, projects here, and I just kind of sat on the bed one night and I just said to I said, I think I'm done. I'm done doing this unless like I join like a giant world-class band or something. I think I'll just try something else. Maybe I'll go back and try to work at a record company. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I've tried doing music for so long and I've gotten tastes of it, but never really made it past the, sample platter. And at that point, I kind of just was like, whatever. And I was like pretty heavily involved in my hometown at that point. I had started working at a record store. Wonderful little mom and pop record shop on the main drag called Just Play Music. I was just getting paid under the table working at this record store. I was promoting shows. I started doing like bringing bands and putting on shows, just mostly because I was bored and I wanted to have something to do and stay in the music game. And then I was doing I walked into the radio station. I said, hey, can I do a local music show? And they're like, yeah, you can do Sunday nights for half an hour. So that just got me like reaching out to all the local bands and getting their things. I was writing for the local like entertainment paper. I was just kind of like big fish in a small pond, and I'm in Santa Barbara doing all these things, kind of doing a recording session. Someone asked me to come play on a session, doing little things here and there.
Bass or guitar?
At that point, it was bass. And then the funny thing is I was doing this band for a minute called the Lap Dancers, and we got the gig to be the local support for this band called Super Drag, which I love to this day. Super Drag, band out of Knoxville, Tennessee. They had a huge hit on the radio back in the 90s called Who Sucked Out the Feeling. And they were on their tour for their record, Head Trip in Every Key, and they needed local support. And so I went and, with this group of guys that I played with every once in a while, and we were the opening band, but there was another local band that went on before us, and there was no one there to see them. It was their first show ever, it turned out. And I look up there and I see this trio, and they're wearing like ill-fitting like thrift store suits. And I couldn't believe it was their first show ever because their singer had such charisma and was just such a natural, frontman. And I had that thing in me where I was like, I feel that weird little spider sense tingling that I felt with Nerf Herder and everything, where I'm like, there's something about this that can work. No one else sees it here, but I feel it. I feel like this guy is the thing. To be honest, with no disrespect, I didn't really think much about the bass player or the drummer. I was just like, focused in on the singer, and I was like, that guy is a fucking star. And I went up to him afterwards, and I happened to be wearing a suit, like a 60s like 3-button suit jacket, like with a fucked up like shirt underneath it or whatever. And we were like, two young guys going, dude, I like your suit. And then I was like, man, don't take this the wrong way, but can I get your phone number? And like, it was kind of like, it was very like kind of homoerotic in a weird way. We were both like admiring each other's aesthetics. And then just like, I was like, dude, you look so cool. And he's like, you look so cool. And I was like, dude, I should get your number. We should we should hang out. We should talk about music. Your band was really cool. And he's like, oh, cool. Well, that was our first show ever. We're not even really a band. We just got this, like, he was going to community college and just heard like, hey, who wants to open we need local bands to open for this touring band because they didn't have an opening band. So he kind of cobbled this band together and did the thing. And we start talking on the phone. I start making him mix CDs, and I'm talking to him about, he's like, oh, I grew up loving Green Day and Smashing Pumpkins and Nirvana. And I'm like, and he currently was obsessed with Elvis Costello. And I'm like, dude, there's all this other cool shit. And I'm turning him on to all this music. We're talking. And then one day he's just like, fuck, man, I wish I would have met you like a month earlier because I already have a bass player, but you're so much more like the guy I would want to be our bass player. And I was like, yeah, well, shit, man, hit me up if he ever leaves. And then I got a call about a month later, and he's like, hey, would you ever want to try playing guitar? And I was like,
holy crap.
I was like, well, at that point, I'd already had this conversation where I was like kind of retiring. I was like, well, I'm done playing music. And I was like, guitar? Yeah, actually, I play guitar. You know, I mean, I started out on guitar, and I obviously, like anyone, I have a guitar leaning against the wall, you know, beater acoustic to fuck around on. And he's like, well, we're thinking like to add a guitar player because I can't really play guitar parts while I'm singing. I can only play rhythm, and I feel like the songs just need more color. And I was like, oh, dude, I completely lied. He's like, can you play guitar? I was like, yeah. And he's like, can you play keyboards? I was like, sure. You know, keyboards. And then he's like, you can sing some harmonies. I was like, yeah, dude, it's all day long. Got all that shit down. And so I just kind of like, I went to his apartment, and he was like, here's the plan. He's like, come to my apartment and we'll jam. Like, so we jammed for like probably like 2 or 3 times. And he like showed me the songs. I learned all my parts, had it all down. He's all, because he was like worried about his bandmates. He's like, make sure you come in and we're just going to say that I haven't jammed with you yet. And they're going to be impressed that you're so good at like suddenly just
that you know the song. So
yeah,
good.
Exactly. So we hatched this whole scheme, and then I went to the practice, and unfortunately I showed up with this like vintage silver tone guitar that sounded like crap.
That's weird. Those guitars usually sound great.
Well, they sound great if you're going for like that kind of a sound, like for like the White Stripes or something. But we're, you know, to like, you know, to do the music that we were playing, I should have had a Les Paul or like a, you know, something like that. But it was all I had. It was the only electric guitar I had at the time. Sure. So I was like, fuck it, you know. And we did it. And honestly, all I thought in my head, and I kid you not, all I thought in my head was, well, this will be fun just to play guitar, not on an acoustic at the edge of my bed, but like actually standing up and pedals. And like, this will be like, selfishly, this is going to be fun for me to just sort of like play guitar for fun. And
sure.
Goodness, I've relinquished my, you know, ambitions of trying to become a rock star and trying to do music for reals. And this will just be sort of a fun thing to do while I figure out the next chapter of my life. Jam out with these local kids and see what happens. Just whatever. As soon as I get in the room, because I'm telling you, dude, I've been in so many bands that were just false starts, like where like I try to get a new band going and the guy would be like, oh, I promised myself I was going to go bowling with my girlfriend on Wednesday night. So, or one guy would say, oh, I can only play 1 show a month. I'm only going to willing to rehearse once a week. I couldn't find anyone who had the like obsession work ethic. And so I get in with these guys thinking I'm just doing it for a laugh. And I get there and it's like military. These guys are fucking like, we're going to record the set. Then we're going to listen to the set. Then we're going to make notes and go back through the set and apply the notes. And then we're going to do it again. And then we're going to take a half an hour dinner break and come back and keep going. And we'd be going till like 4 a.m. And it was unbelievable. I was like, these guys are fucking monsters. I finally found guys, just when I was about to say I'm done, I finally found guys that are as crazy as I am. And it was like a competition. Like we'd show up at practice and be like, what did you do for the band this week? And I'd be like, oh, dude, I booked us a show. I made flyers. And he'd be like, oh yeah, well, I booked a studio time and I got us this, that. And we were like, oh shit. So we were like having this internal competition to see who could like, you know, who wanted it the most. And that was the feel in the room. And that was Sugarcult.
That's awesome. That's really cool, man.
Within 2 years, I had a record deal, was on the radio, was on tour. And within 3 years, we had sold 100,000 records. You know, within 4 years, we were on the main stage of the Warped Tour. Within 5 years, we were the opening band for Green Day, playing stadiums. You know, and to this day, I still look back and go, that was just supposed to be my like, kind of like, just for now, sort of, you know, interim pastime. You know, it turned out to be a career.
So go back to that question. Best part of your success with Sugarcult, and what was the most difficult part?
Well, the best part of my success with Sugarcult was my success with Sugarcult. Because like I said, it wasn't planned. It was the least planned. It's like you go looking to get laid, you never get laid.
Right.
And if you do, it's for the wrong reasons with the wrong person, and something happens. You know, it's like
it's a funny
analogy. Into it, not expecting to find success. I just went into it expecting to just do it just because, kind of getting back to the original roots of like being a kid, like, just play music with your friends because it's fun and it's something to do on a Tuesday night. And then it turned out to be something that just worked. And I think that's the trick in life, is if you do it as a labor of love, eventually the success will follow because you magnetize yourself and then shit starts to happen to you. Like I noticed you say on your website, happiness is a choice.
Yeah.
You're absolutely fucking right. You can decide that you're trying to make it, or you can decide that playing music is just pretty rad and you're going to do it because why not, you know?
Right. And if something happens, great. If not, it doesn't matter because you just want to have fun playing music.
Right. Because like, why set yourself up to fail? Why go, hey, I'm doing this to try to make it? You're going to go out there with this intensity and this, it's like dogs can smell the fear on you, man. People can smell that desperation and that intensity. And it's like, I've never seen a band, especially in LA, dude. I don't know what's like where you live, but like you go see a band and you see these bands all the time in this town where you're like, that band is trying way too fucking hard.
Yeah.
And I don't mean it's like, you should just sit back and relax and be lazy. We worked our fucking asses off.
Right. You have to.
Well, why wouldn't you?
But you worked your asses off.
You don't work your ass off because you have to work your ass off. You work your ass off because it's fun. You know, it's like, dude, why not like try to do the best you can?
Yeah, totally, man.
I mean, playing guitar is a fucking hassle. It hurts. It's fucking expensive. It's, you know, it's inconvenient, you know, it fucks up your fingertips. You know, it's loud. It's, you know, it's fucking annoying. You know what I mean? Like, what do we do this for? You know, we're gluttons for punishment. It's because it becomes an obsession. It's like all of this stuff, doing any of this shit is a hassle. Lugging gear, playing shows, arguing about shit at band practice, just changing your strings, and especially those like the G and the B and the high E string, like they never, you know, it's such a fucking pain in the ass. And then you have to clip the strings and all this. It's such a pain in the ass to play music. Why would anybody do it unless you love it?
It's fun, unless it's, you know, that's a great answer. The best part of your success is that you actually became successful, because that was not the goal. That's really cool, actually.
The worst part about it,
yeah,
is once you get the success, you're like, this is fucking rad, and you do everything you can to sustain it. And because we built it brick by brick ourselves, almost every step of the way, even when we got a record deal, we didn't just sit back and relax and go, yeah, dude, tell us what to do. We were on the phone with a record company every day, because I used to work at I used to run a record label. So I'd call them up and hold them accountable. I'd be like, hey, did you guys call this magazine? How come there's no ad in this magazine? They sort of hated me because they just wanted me to be the dumb fucking guitar player who sat back and just dreamed all day strumming his guitar. But I also had a conscience about the industry. So I was like, how come my friend at Hits Magazine has never heard of our band before? What's your radio department doing?
Yeah, that's cool that you had that but maybe not for the record label, but good for your band that you had.
Well, it was good for us. I mean, I did it in a respectful, like in a loving way, but I was sort of like, hey, let's work on this. Let's do this together.
Yeah.
You know? And we were that kind of a band. Like when our label said, hey, we're not going to put out a third single, we said, you know, that's why I tapped back into my Santa Barbara punk rock roots. I was like, you're not going to put out the single? Cool. We'll just put out a single ourselves. Okay, what do we need to do to make a single? Video. How do we get a video? Let's call the guy who our record company paid an exorbitant amount of money to last time to make our video. Let's call him up, because now he used to be director Steven Orrit. Now he's just Steve.
Right.
Let's call him up and go, hey, Steve, we don't have a budget, but do you feel like jumping on a plane and coming to where we are and shooting us, and we'll see what happens? And he was like, fuck yeah, let's do it. You know, because you got to think, anyone who's in this game, video directors are people who love shooting video footage.
Right.
Writers are people who love writing. Photographers are people who love taking pictures. We're like, look, dude, we don't have a big budget or any budget, but you want to shoot this shit? It'll be fun. He's like, sure, let's do it. Got it. It looked good. Then we sent it to our label, and they're like, "You motherfuckers, okay, we'll get behind it."
Oh, so they did. That was great.
Right?
Good
So
for
you
you.
just
So
get
you're
that
super
initiative. You got to
industrious.
do it. You know,
You're very industrious.
well, you got to be scrappy, because you can't. I think that's when I never feel sorry for bands that complain and say, "Oh, you know, our record, you know, didn't do well." It's like, well, why? It's a good record. Why didn't
Well,
it
the
do
thing
well?
is, most
Not
people
helpless.
don't have the experience that you had to say, hey, let's do this, let's do that. And most guys and musicians in general, unfortunately, are not interested in that at all. They want to play music and they're hoping somebody else does that. Nowadays, it's got to be different because there is nobody else to do that. So if it's meant to be, it's got to be up to me kind of thing.
Well, yeah, we're in the era of the independent artist. I mean, that's one of the things I lecture about. But I think we've always been in the era of the independent artist. You know, it's no secret that the fucking Rolling Stones, I'm going to go see, you know, it's no secret that they're still a functioning band. Why? Because fucking Mick Jagger notoriously is on the phone every fucking morning at 6 a.m. making business calls.
Yeah.
He doesn't sit back and and Mick Jagger does not need, he can hire a whole team. He's got people, you know, bending over backwards for him, but he still holds it in his hand on a daily basis. It's like he still feels the fucking dough before he fucking gives it to the kitchen to cook it into Rolling Stones.
I like how you said that. That was good.
You know what I'm saying?
Feels the dough before he gives it to the kitchen.
So does fucking Madonna. So do all these people that become legends. They're not passive. They don't just sit back and let their handlers do it for them. Prince, are you kidding me? Michael Jackson, you know, of course I'm bringing up dead people, but like, you know, these people are on top of they stay on top of it. The ones that sit back and relax and hope it all works out, you're leaving a lot to chance. You're putting a lot of faith in people who basically are only being nice to you because it's their day job.
Right. 100%. I have this thing. I always say, hope is not a good business strategy, man.
Well, let's look at it like this. Cause you have kids, right?
3.
Yeah. And I got 2, and I look at it as like directly the same thing as having kids. You can have a babysitter. You can send your kids to school. You can have a nanny. You still got to raise your kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you don't raise your kid and you just go, let the nanny do everything, or let send him to school and hope the teachers teach him the north and south and east and west, and your kid comes home and doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah. The burden's on you, man.
The burden's on you, man.
In theory.
It's your job to show your kid north, south, east, west, and then everything else just embellishes it, right? So I look at that with artists. I'm like, hey, look, it's your job. And it doesn't have to be like, that's not a bummer. That should be fun. To me, it's part of the fun. Like the creative process is like, hey, let's think of a song. Let's make up a song. Let's get a vision for this band. Let's get a vision for this record. Let's make up a song. Now let's come up with creative parts for the song. Now let's come up with a creative way to approach recording the song. Now let's come up with a creative way to package this song. And now let's come up with a creative way to market this song. It's all the same muscle group. It's creativity.
Yeah, but
creativity business.
There's something with musicians, they just don't like doing the marketing and sales. I don't know if it's we all have like the conversation that we heard somebody saying when we were younger, whether it was our parents or grandparents, some brothers and sisters, about what's bad. And I think for musicians, a lot of them that I've talked to, they just heard that conversation of don't be a sellout. And then somehow they converted that to, okay, don't sell my stuff. And they just disconnect from that. And I don't know why. And it's
right. It's all about the music. And if you like have like a cool look, then you're somehow compromising the integrity of your music. But then you're like, then what happens to Slash? What happens to Angus Young? What happens to Rick Nielsen?
Right.
What happens to Jimi Hendrix? These guys are grown men and they look fucking ridiculous. You know what I mean? But somehow it's okay because they're Jimi Hendrix. It's like, no, you have a fucking like band uniform on and you're lighting your guitar on fire.
Right.
But you get to be Jimi Hendrix, so we'll just sit here and fucking look like dorks and put a poster of you on our wall. It's like this mentality where people need something that's bigger than them to look up to. rather than just looking up to themselves and going like, well, fuck. I mean, Jimi Hendrix is fucking amazing. Rick Nielsen is amazing.
Yeah.
Angus Young is amazing. Slash is amazing. They're all fucking incredible and worthy of every ounce of their praise. But at the same time, it's like, I've never understood that. Like why people can look up to them and then feel like in order for them to have integrity, they need to like just get up get on stage in a fucking, you know, in whatever they woke up in and, you know, just look down at the ground. It's like being a showman is part of the art. Look at the fucking jazz musicians. Look at, you know, every rock and roll icon. I don't know. I think, but I would
bet Hendrix was not doing any of that with Hendrix dressed like that for the same reason that you made those phone calls. So it was authentic. I don't know anything about Slash. I would say Rick Nielsen and what do you call it? Who's the other person?
Angus Young.
Angus Young had some sort of mindset of, okay, we're creating a brand.
Right.
That's what I read about those guys. I haven't read enough about Slash to know his business background or anything, or his, you know, feelings about that. But I would, you know, so I think it's random, some of this too. Like some people feel comfortable, some people don't.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just don't think I've learned from myself, if something's not natural, you're just not going to do it, and you shouldn't do it.
Oh yeah. There's nothing worse than looking at somebody. And like I said, it goes back to the same thing, trying too hard.
Yes.
It's like people can just tell when it's not disingenuous. They can just tell, and it's cool, you know? And you know what? A lot of people, I mean, we all have fucking pictures we look back on and just go, oh my God, what was I thinking? You know, it's like, it's all fucking lottery, you know? Sometimes you do some shit and it works and people look back and go, wow, you were so ahead of your time. How did you, you know? And sometimes you do shit and people look back and go, oh my God, you're a fucking dork. And you're like, yeah, you know? But who wasn't at some point? Everyone's got a picture of them when they were like 7.
Yeah.
Crazy looking teeth before they had braces, or you know, maybe that picture was taken when they were 17. Maybe it was taken when they were 27. Everyone figures it out at different times, and like it is what it is, you know. Or maybe they don't figure it out at all. You know, usually it's because someone's like trying to find someone to make out with, so they go, maybe I should fucking start not looking like a total tool, you know. But to me, it's like, as far as like falling in love with the sort of romance of rock and roll, like the presentation and all that kind of stuff, because Sugarcult definitely had a military, like enforced look. We sat there and said, we are not going to just wear whatever the hell we wake up in on stage. Mostly because we were such different people that we were like worried that if we just left that to chance, then our bass player might show up on stage with like a fucking, you know, who knows what he's going to, you know, like some hip hop gear on, and our drummer's going to show up with like whatever his, you know, like he had no style sense, you know, he would show up with like looking like he was going golfing. And then our singer was, you know, like, so we kind of went like, at first we started wearing like black suits. That was just kind of our thing, because it was just a nice way to neutralize it. And went, hey, black suits worked for the Beatles. Let's start there. And then it started becoming like, well, how do we assert ourselves? And it was like, well, maybe like a t-shirt under a suit jacket, maybe a tie that's fucked up with a safety pin through it because we're stealing from the bands like the Ruts.
Right.
And like little by little, we kind of found our own thing. But even to the, you know, all through Sugarcult, we always had this thing where like, let's try not to look like a bowl of Skittles on stage, where you just have every random dude, like one guy's wearing blue, one guy's wearing yellow. Like, let's kind of commit to a color palette. And like, even like if you look at any pictures from our Lights Out tour, it was like black, white, gray, any shade of black, white, or gray, and then gold, shiny gold. So we would have like maybe all black and white, but a gold tie. All black and white, but gold socks. You know, that was just the thing. And it was just easy because most guys just, like our drummer and a bass player probably just wore all black. Me and our singer would have just accents of color. And then what happens is you look at it aesthetically and it looks like a band.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's part of rock and roll, part of the fun of rock and roll. There's a certain, like, you look at the Ramones. There's never a picture of the Ramones where they don't look like the Ramones.
Oh, hell yeah.
And that's kind of cool. Even Nirvana, like, as much as they were like the anti-look, they still had a look. Like, it just
defined grunge.
Millionaires, they still like wore thrift store clothes, not because they couldn't afford to buy like Dolce and Gabbana, but because that's what they wore, and it was their thing, you know. And it kind of like, it would have looked weird if one of the guys in Nirvana was wearing like
a black and white suit.
Yeah, a black and white suit. And the other guy was wearing like a, ripped up t-shirt and unshaven or whatever, So anyways, I could go down that street, but like, the hard part, since we did build everything brick by brick, was how things turned out when, like, at the cusp of probably when we were just about to like break the sound barrier. Like we were on this, like, from when we started in Santa Barbara, just sort of as a lark, it was just like, seemed like one thing after another, things went well. We got a show, we got another show, we got another show. More people came to that show. More people want to come to the next show. Hey, someone in LA wants us to play. Hey, someone wants to help us out. Hey, someone wants to manage us. Hey, someone's a record company. We just got a record deal. The Warped Tour. The Warped Tour gave us, we got 10 days on the Warped Tour, and that, while on that 10-day run of the Warped Tour, the guy, Kevin Lyman, who runs the Warped Tour, came up to us and said, "Do you guys want to stay on the whole tour?"
Oh, that was cool.
Offered us 2 months. So 10 days on the Warped Tour turned into 2 months. From that tour, we got opening slots on other bands' tours. It was just like one thing after another. That we signed to a record company called Ultimatum, mostly because all the major labels were like holding off on us, saying, we like it, but we want to hear more. And this label was like, we love you guys. We're going to come to every show. We're going to throw everything we've got at you guys. And we kind of like that underdog of like, let's be this label's golden child rather than just
you gotta be the one they're paying attention to. That's what I've learned.
Yeah. And that was another thing. Like, that's where maybe me having a little bit of that experience with Nerf Herder, I was like, guys, it's really easy to get swept away with the idea of being on like Capitol Records.
Right.
But at the end of the day, Capitol Records has already got their bills paid by fucking Coldplay and Frank Sinatra and Radiohead and the Beatles. They don't need us as much as we need them. But this label needs us as much as we need them. They need us probably more than we need them, because we, and they have a lot of money. They have what we don't have. They have money, they have infrastructure, they have distribution, and the desire to be a record company. We have songs, dudes that are willing to fucking work hard, a good live show. Let's do what we do, put it with what they do, and let's make it happen together. And hopefully it'll be a wonderful situation. The most amount of records they had ever sold, when we signed to them, they had sold 5,000 records, so 5,000 CDs by a band. I'm really embarrassed to say this, by a band called Dog Star, which was Keanu Reeves' band. Keanu Reeves is a bass player.
That's right.
Yeah. So Keanu Reeves just sort of had this vanity project band because he was a musician, and he put it out on them, and they had sold 5,000 records. And then they had put out the song by the Baja Men called "Who Let the Dogs Out." It's like sort of a novel.
That probably sold a lot more than 5,000.
That was their only claim to fame. We're like, what are we getting ourselves into? We're signing this label that has like the two things they have going for them are two things we don't want to like. We're like embarrassed to tell our friends about. Like, oh, we're signed to this label. Oh, what else they have? Oh, yeah, Keanu Reeves and Who Let the Dogs Out, And this is before John Wick, and, this is when Keanu Reeves was still considered kind of lame. But anyway, so we did it, and I'm telling you, I remember playing the Hollywood, what was it called? It's called Avalon, but back then I think it was still called the Palace. I remember playing there a year for the 1-year anniversary. We had just toured like dogs. The 1-year anniversary of our record, we had a bottle of champagne, and a guy from our record company came and showed us the sales statistics, and our record on the 1-year anniversary of it coming out. It came out actually August of 2001. So almost exactly, August, I think it came out August 24th, 2001, and it's August 20th right now. So almost exactly
18
years ago. Fuck. 1 year after that, it had sold 100,000 copies.
Very cool. Wow.
So we exceeded our wildest dreams. We thought maybe we would sell 10,000 records if we were really successful. We had no idea that being on a label that size, that it was even possible to sell 100,000 records. We got on the radio, captured this cultural moment where bands like Jim Eat World and Sum 41 and Newfound Glory and, Good Charlotte, all these bands were kind of just bubbling. And it was this moment, and Blink-182 was as big as ever. Green Day was just starting to kind of come back because they had kind of gone away for a while. And, we were just somehow found ourselves surfing this wave, this set of waves that you know, lots of thanks to the Warped Tour for kind of believing in us, because they put us on the Warped Tour when we were, you know,
that got you exposure
before our record came out. So we recorded our record in the spring of 2001, went on the Warped Tour June, July, August of 2001, put out our record August of 2001, and then the rest is history. And that's when Bouncing Off the Walls and, you know, Pretty Girl and Stuck in America. But there's one big story that I'm leaving out here that's kind of crazy. If you want to look on your calendar really quick, bust it on your phone and look at the date. Is it because records used to come out on Tuesday back then? Now they come out on Fridays. Release dates used to be Tuesday. So it was August 24th, 2001, if I'm not mistaken.
Was that a Tuesday?
Okay. Now look at your calendar and count 1 week from that would be what?
31st.
1 week from that would be what?
7th.
1 week from that would be, no. Then I must be getting the date wrong. Basically, exactly 2 or 3 weeks before Tuesday, September 11th.
Oh, wow. That's
and you
right.
know what our song was called?
What?
Stuck in America.
Wow.
And you know what the lyrics were? Everybody's talking about blowing up the neighborhood.
Wow.
So once again, Marko DeSantis is in a band where 2 weeks before the fucking record comes out, it was the prophecy. Last time it was off to a bad start with Popsicle.
Yeah.
And then our singer, Keith Brown, died in a car accident. Here I am, 100 years later, picked up the pieces, reinvented myself, come back as a guitar player, built this band up from the ground up against all odds. We get our record, gets on the radio. After the successful Warped Tour run, we're getting tons of ads. And just like that, oh my God, this is unprecedented. You guys are getting this song on so many radio stations. It's going to be so huge.
9/11.
Every single
everything shut down.
They made us go back in the studio and recut the vocals. And I mean, I feel guilty to even, you know, it's not like, woe is me. You know, I mean, think about the people that lost their lives and the cultural change that happened after that. I mean, that's the least of my worries is what happened to my silly little rock and roll band that was just supposed to be a hobby. But at the same time, it was one of those things where you're like, God dang it, you know?
Wow.
And so that was it. And I was like, well, fuck it. Let's just do what we do and see what happens and work our asses off. And our label said, you know, they gave us enough money of tour support where they're like, you basically have $80 a day that will supplement so you guys can stay on the road. We toured in a van with no trailer, so we cut our expenses, kept all our gear. We only had one crew member, and we would play a show, and then we would drive like an hour or two out of town to like whatever, like Podunk Village in the middle of nowhere where we could get a cheap hotel. And we would, instead of getting 2 rooms for $80, we would get 1 room for $40, and we would all sleep in 1 room. Our bass player was kind enough to choose to sleep on the floor. So it was like 2 guys to a bed and 1 guy on the floor.
Sure. And
like little Days Inns and fucking Super 8s. And that's how we did it. We kept it really raw and lean, and basically just said, like, our philosophy was like, let's tour like a punk band and use the radio as icing on the cake. If the label does their job and gets us on the radio or gets us on MTV, then hell yeah, we'll be there. But until then, let's not rely on that. Let's just build our, you know, get on tours, rely on our relationships with other bands, throw ourselves out there. We hoard ourselves out as opening bands. We're just like, who wants us to open for them? We went on, opened for Unwritten Law. We opened for the Ataris. We opened for Good Charlotte. We opened for Goldfinger. We opened for Real Big Fish. We just would anyone who would have us, we'd go and open.
Kelly Lemieux was he in that at that time?
Oh yeah, Kelly was great. And you know, every time you do one of these tours, I say it in such a passing thing, but like every one of these tours is like, if you've ever been on tour, it's like that feeling you get when you're a kid and you go to like summer camp. You know, if you went to like sleepaway camp, it's like a week of your life or 2 weeks of your life, but like bonds with people. You meet these people and then you kind of like come back home as a different person. It's like the people you meet on those tours from the other bands are so generous and they teach you the ropes. They're like, yo, this is what you got to do. this is what you know, and you're constantly learning, you know, they're coming up to you at sound check and showing you some tricks on your guitar, showing you about pedals. You're paying attention to them. You're learning how those big professional bands function. You're like, oh, they have their own in-ear monitors. Oh, they have their own sound person. Hey, we should do that. You know, oh, this is how they do it. This is how they, and meanwhile, we're like going in their dressing rooms after they leave, and we're like just scavenging all their shit from their dressing rooms and like living off that stuff, you know? And we're already a band with a record deal.
Yeah.
So like, that's what I tell bands. I'm like, just because you got a record deal doesn't mean the starving musician struggle is over. Like, you have to stay with that like scrappy mentality, even once you've quote unquote made it. I mean, we had a song on the radio and a record in stores, and we're still like, cool, Unwritten Law's gone. Let's go get their fucking peanut butter and jelly. Let's go get their fucking hummus. Let's put that shit in a cooler in our van so we can not have to stop and waste all our money at Taco Bell. You know what I mean? And that was it. And that paid off because we were able to tour nonstop for about 2 years and build a fan base where, like, once our songs did get on the radio, once Bouncing Off the Walls and Pretty Girl became singles and became hits, you came to our show and it was like, it was already packed with people who knew the words to our album tracks. Because we'd be playing the show and then we'd be out there in the merch, you know, talking to kids the whole night, signing CDs for them, you know, signing merch for them, keeping in touch with them with email, you know, really keeping that like sort of DIY attitude and keeping it pretty grassroots. So when we did get songs on the radio and we did get on MTV, it was like all those kids that believed in us from the Warped Tour 2001, from all those tours when we were the opening band, to them, it felt like their song was on the radio.
Hey, we got to, I guess, start wrapping this up, but I want to ask you 3 more questions.
Yeah, anything.
Best decision you ever made?
I mean, this sounds so corny, but like probably to get married and start a family.
That's cool.
Because I think that's one of those things where there's not a lot of being a music fanatic. You do sort of remove yourself from the mainstream. And I think it's very tempting to keep on, to almost like deflect anything that resembles the mainstream and just go, well, that's not,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's too ordinary, too conventional, probably.
Too normie, yeah. And you kind of like, you can sort of like in a weird, almost like snobby way, like write off a lot of shit that's actually pretty fucking cool, you know? And, you know, I'm glad that I had it in my mind from when I was a kid. I was like, oh, I know I always want to do something related to music. And I also know that I definitely want to have a family someday. And so when I remember, like I told you earlier when we were first talking, when we Sugarcult, you know, somewhere into the Sugarcult journey, I went into Tiffany's in New York, and then I was like, oh shit, I kind of had like sticker shock at how expensive engagement rings were.
Was that the same woman that you are married to now? Anyway?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay.
But like, so anyway, so then eventually we were on tour in Newcastle. We were in England, and I was in Newcastle, and that's where my wife had family from Newcastle. Her dad was originally from there. And so I thought like, oh, I was just kind of walking down the street and I saw a jewelry store. I was like, oh shit, if I'm going to do something,
yeah, that'd be cool,
ordinary, like get married, like most people my age are doing, then I should at least do it in a way that's meaningful. And I was like, so of course in my mind, I had to make it sort of dramatic. And I was like, I'm going to buy a ring. I knew she was coming. She was flying out to meet me on the tour, like towards the end of the tour. And then we were going to spend because usually we do that. Like if we were in Europe, like on tour or whatever, like try to turn it into a little bit of a vacation if we didn't have a tour right after it, because you're already there. I'd be like, hey, come out towards the end. Because by then we were touring in tour buses and it was a little more comfortable. So maybe we'd have like our significant others come out for a little while or whatever. And, you know, also want to share the experience because you're like, okay, I kind of won the lottery here. I want to like share this.
You're getting big points, man. I won the lottery here. You're getting big points for that.
Well, no, I'm not getting, but I'll go with it if you want. But more, I was thinking career-wise, it was like we kind of won the lottery. Like, holy shit, we're touring with these bands. So I would have like my you know, like my cousin from the East Coast who was the best man at my wedding. I'd have him come out and like hang with us for a couple of weeks on tour. I'd have like my good buddy that I grew up with in Santa Barbara from my first band ever, like come out, fly out to like Vegas and hang with us, jump on the tour bus for a couple shows. Cause you really do kind of get in this like, almost like it's like a dream where you can't even tell, like, you can't believe it's actually happening. When you're touring with Green Day and you're playing like the Long Beach Arena and you're like, holy shit, when I was a child, I was in that crowd watching like Iron Maiden say "Scream for Me Long Beach," and here I am on stage saying "Scream for Me Long Beach." That's fucking mind-blowing, you know? Nice. When you're in Japan for like the 10th time playing and people are at the airport with like homemade Sugarcult signs and meeting with the hotel lobby, you need to like have someone there to pinch you to make sure you're not dreaming, other than the people in your own little bubble of your band. Because otherwise it starts to almost feel normal. It's like, well, this is normal. There's always someone who wants my autograph, and there's always someone who wants to take a picture with me, and there's always someone who wants to interview me. And that's not fucking normal. That's weird.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's like having someone from home come and be with you for a little while is a nice way to be like, not to show off and be ostentatious. To be like,
no, to be grounded, to keep things like in reality.
Grounded. And it also reflects like, isn't this fucking crazy? You know? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, this is fun though, right? And you have to remember, there was one piece of advice someone said to me. It was my buddy, this guy named Mike Woglum that we used to call Wog. He was like in a band with my old friend Luke. And he said to me, he said, I don't know who he got this advice from, but he parlayed it to me. He said, always remember you get to do this. You don't have to do this.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's like our MO in Sugarcult. Let's always remember that. Cause like there's times where you're like, fuck, the internet sucks, or there's not enough ice cubes in our fucking drink in Europe. And you can fall into this weird thing where you get almost used to it. You're doing something so extraordinary that you get almost used to it. And you forget that like for half your life, you played in front of nobody at a fucking bar and you were lucky to get a drink ticket.
Right.
And chips and salsa. You know what I mean? And here you are with like your own dressing room and all the things you want and a tour bus and your name on the marquee and people who know your fucking songs, who want to buy your hoodies afterwards. That's fucking mind blowing. And I'm not going to say you take it for granted, but you have to always keep that in your mind. Like, this is a fucking amazing, like this is a blessing. I don't deserve this more than anybody else from my hometown that plays music. And matter of fact, I can name you 5 people that are way fucking better guitar players than me and probably way better songwriters than Sugarcult collectively in my hometown right now, you know? And there's no reason why we should be playing at Wembley, you know what I mean, in front of a roaring crowd, and they shouldn't be. So you have to keep yourself in check, you know, and remind yourself, I get to do this. I don't have to do this. So instead of being all, yeah, I got to go to fucking Amsterdam and play a show, you're like, I get to go to Amsterdam and play a show.
Yeah,
so that said, let's go have some food. Let's go look around. Let's take some pictures. Let's enjoy this. Let's absorb this whole thing and not just sit backstage complaining about the fucking mayonnaise and playing in the tour bus. You know what I mean? Which a lot of bands do. And it fucking drives me crazy. It's like, dude, this is your dream come true. And also, and I know this from personal experience, at any given time, boom, they can fucking pull the plug.
Yeah, the plug. Yeah, totally.
The record company just disappeared unceremoniously right when we were about to get as big as we probably ever would have gotten. A record company just went done and disappeared. Not personally, but the people behind the scenes that owned them said, we don't want to be in the record business anymore. And unceremoniously, it was over.
I have heard that story from more than you're not the first guy.
We spent 2 years just like fighting in legal battles, trying to get them to like give us the rights back to our record, trying to get them to pay us unpaid royalties. It was just a disaster, and it kind of broke our hearts. And that ultimately was probably the like pin that burst the bubble and made us slowly just sort of like the balloon that just sort of ran out of air and then kind of just landed. And then we all kind of started other lives. We're like, okay, well, what else am I going to do? Not because we were beholden to the record company, but because it started to represent to us like, like, well, maybe this is a good, maybe this is as good a time as any to do other things we wanted to do with our lives. And our singer started producing records. Our bass player started another project. You know, I started doing the lecture circuit, and then that led to teaching. And at the same time, we looked around, and I was like, I had started a family. Our drummer had started a family. We all had, you know, young children, and kind of went like, hey, this is actually maybe a blessing in disguise, because my friends that are still actively doing their bands are gone all the time, and they're raising their kids like this. They're on fucking Skype.
Yeah.
And I get to like be with my kids and take them to school and really get to know them. Of course, now that they're fucking approaching the teenage years, I'm like, please,
you'd love to be on tour
right now. Get me the fuck out of here. I'll pay you to let me be at your band so I can get out of here. But yeah. You know, I think that's what naturally happens, and I just like feel like that's kind of life. It's like you know, you can't complain, because who would listen? Oh, I don't get to be a rock star all the time anymore. You got to be a rock star at all. Is 5 minutes more than most people ever get to be a rock star in their fucking lives.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm not that fucking great of a guitar player. You know, it's like, I don't deserve, I'm not entitled. I don't feel like I'm entitled to do this professionally. It's like, hey, I got to do it professionally. It's led to a lot of other things. We'll see what happens next. You know, fuck it. So thank goodness I made that decision to get married, which led to starting a family, which led to, you know, having more of a domestic life, because that's something that when you're have that sort of like blinders on and you're just like dead jailer rock and roll, you know, you don't even stop to think about that kind of shit. But it's a good thing that while the band was doing really well, I kind of went, you know what, I'm going to go for it. And I bought that ring in Newcastle, and I said to myself, when I see her, I'm either going to propose or I'm going to throw this in the river and break up with her on the spot. And I kept it under my pillow in my tour
dramatic.
bus. I thought about it every night. Yeah, because I was like, I'm tired of like doing things. That's one thing bands will teach you too. It's like, why should you do something sort of? Do it all the way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're going to play a show, play that show like your fucking life depends on it. And then wake up the next day and do it again. Don't hold back because it's Tuesday night and you're in Wisconsin and you're saving yourself for Chicago. Fucking play Wisconsin like it's New Year's Eve in New York at Madison Square Garden. And then you wake up the next day, because that's what athletes do. They don't like sort of play football.
I'm only playing the Oilers this week. Let me go half-ass. Yeah.
Yeah, you fucking play like you drain the reserves, and then you wake up the next day and you do it again. Yeah. And that's the way I think to approach life, because spoiler alert, you know?
Yeah.
We know how the story ends. And so you might as well fucking take the scenic route. You might as well get rad. You know, that's kind of my philosophy that I've just sort of come to. And I was lucky to have people to model that for me. You know, we didn't get into this, but like I grew up with a single mom who was a professional dancer. So she was a kid in an immigrant family who at 6 years old decided she loved dance, and no one took her seriously. They're like, dance? Okay, you're a kid, but then now you're a teenager. Like, and she's like, yeah, I still want to do dance. And then she put herself through college, got into Juilliard, became, you know, had no parents, could barely speak English, let alone pay for anything. So she did it all herself, got in dance companies, made a name for herself, toured the world. And then eventually, like, you know, she was with my dad, and they moved to Europe, and then it didn't work out with my dad. So she just grabbed me and my sister and moved, two babies, a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, and moved to Santa Barbara. That's why I was in Santa Barbara. That's why I grew up in Santa Barbara. I'm 3 years old.
It's a good story, man.
It's a crazy story because my mom had only been in Santa Barbara once on tour when she was in a touring.
Also, like
her family was from Philadelphia. They were Greek immigrants in Philadelphia.
Wow.
So it's fucking crazy because she met my dad because she was doing dance in Italy, and my dad was Italian. That's why I have a big nose. And that's why my name is Marko. And so she, like, literally, the only reason I grew up in Santa Barbara was because my mom got a job offer in Santa Barbara, and she knew it was going to be like the furthest geographically from my dad. So he would have to, like, you know, she just took the job because she figured like, hey, that seems kind of crazy. And that's where we ended up. And it's one of those weird things where you go like, what the John Lennon quote, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. Like you just never know how shit's going to work out. And I can't imagine not being someone who says rad and awesome and dude every other word. Like I feel like such a California guy, and I could have easily been a Roman or a Philly dude, you know, and all my cousins on the East Coast are like into sports. I probably wouldn't even have long hair or play music. I'd probably be like some fucking dude hanging out, complaining about the Phillies.
Watching the Eagles, man.
watching the
Eagles on Thursday night and Monday night.
I don't know. I mean, life is a fucking trip. But anyway,
let me ask you one.
Got into all that. But my mom was probably the biggest example to me, where I was like, before RKL, before the scene in Santa Barbara, before all the bands, I think my mom was the one who made it seem like, hey, the crazy thing you think about doing when you're a kid is actually possible.
Well, she lived that dream, so that's really cool. And she was probably
but she wasn't like
supportive of you.
She wasn't like rich. I mean, she didn't like become, you know, if you're famous in the dance community, unless you're like Baryshnikov, no one knows who the fuck you are. It's not like anyone wants your autograph, you know. But like, it's just that idea that like.
But she didn't do it to be famous. Probably just the same way you did. There's so many avenues in life, and if you live and make fear-based decisions or do things because you think that's what grown-ups are supposed to do, you know, I feel like you miss an opportunity. I know that sounds pretty like obnoxious and maybe like it sounds very normie, as you would say.
Well, I don't want to sound patronizing to like someone who's like, yo, man, I just need to fucking work my job. Cause it's like, yeah, dude, I got mouths to feed. I mean, dude, if I didn't own a house and have a family, I probably wouldn't be teaching college either.
Yeah.
I would probably be fucking around, starting another band. I don't know. But like you do make decisions more, you know, you make adult decisions as you have more responsibilities. You go, okay, this might not be as glamorous or might not be as big of a windfall at the other end of it, but it's something that I can do well. I can live in my authenticity. I can bring some value to the table for other people that are aspiring to do what I got to do. And it feels good. It pays well, and I can sleep in my own bed and feel like I made a difference that matters. You know what I mean?
I totally get it, man.
And I would hate to be like, you know, I would love to do more Sugarcult or still play music with other people. But like that said, I would hate to have to do that, especially right now. Like that's where I think like it turns out to be a blessing in disguise. Cause I would hate to feel like, oh shit, how many hoodies did we sell? Okay. Because I got to put my kids through school. How do we sell more hoodies? What do we have to do to our sound? Do we need to start sound like Billie Eilish now? Like, what do we need to do to change our sounds? I would hate to feel like trapped. Like if I didn't tour and make records, then my kids weren't going to eat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think that the music would suffer. I think when you make music as a labor of love and then oh yeah, it becomes successful, that's awesome. But if you make music because you're trying to stay successful or make money, I don't know, man. Something about it. That's why bands always make their best records early on. You know?
Last question, man. Biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years, and how much of that change has been intentional? And how much has just been a part of aging?
Well, let's see. Let me see if I made a note of that in my cheat sheet. It's funny, I took like 4 pages of notes when you sent me the questions, and I haven't looked at them once this whole time. Like,
that's usually what happens. That's why I send people the questions. They're always like, hey man, thanks for sending me the questions. And nothing goes, because it's off script usually, because I have to just see where things are going.
But, well, I would say though, like just in general, I think that the biggest shift you know, as I went from like a, you know, just scrappy young adult into the guy I am today, I feel like I'm just a little less intense. And, you know, I can't tell, like, it probably has a lot to do with having children. I think once you have kids, you become a lot less ego driven, where it's not just about you anymore. It's about other people. You're like, you're doing things in service of other people. And I think that's a healthy thing. And I think until that point, I was pretty like egocentric. It was pretty much like, I'm doing this because it's the best thing for me. I'm doing this, you know, and when you're in a band, you become like the Avengers. It's like 4 separate superheroes bonding together because together they can each get further.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just like, well, I'm just completely selfless and I want my bass player to aspire to great heights. You know, you become like a collective of people that all have this mindset of like, they want to do something extraordinary with their lives.
Which is great.
Right. There's an old quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but I think it said like, what was it? Something like, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together.
I've never heard that. That's a really nice quote.
Isn't that a great one?
Yeah,
I think that's true. It's like, you can just like rip through shit on your own and be a control freak, or you can like learn to like do stuff with other people and let go a little bit maybe, but like learn something, or maybe let a little bit of them rub off on you. And I think you'll go farther and last longer that way, I think. But so I'd say like the biggest thing I would say that's changed is like, and I think this also just has to do with getting older, because you realize you don't have all the time in the world. Like when you're 20, you just think you think you have infinity, you know? And when you get to this age, you start to feel like, I think that the 2 words in my brain that are sort of just in my brain on the forefront of my dashboard at all times are like quality over quantity.
I hear you.
You know, it's like I'd have better, more meaningful experiences, you know, less things, but the things I do have are more quality things, you know, more quality food. Maybe you're not drinking a 12-pack of beer, but instead of a 12-pack of shitty beer, you're having one really nice craft beer.
Yeah, man, I hear you.
Instead of drinking just a bunch of fucking truck stop coffee just to stay awake, you're enjoying really good coffee that you've like ground yourself and you like bought when you were in Portland at some cool little place, you know? And I know that sounds kind of pretentious, but like, it's just like, I feel like that's kind of the phase of life. Whereas when you're young, you're just like, gimme, get as much as I can get. Let me collect records. Let me have this. Let me get that. Let me grab this. And now it becomes a little bit more like, okay, less is more. Like a few things that are awesome versus just a bunch of shit that's maybe mostly just a distraction.
Well, plus you don't have the time to do all that shit when you're older. You got more responsibility.
Yeah, you start to kind of like narrow that down. You're like, you know what? Like, it's like I took the family to see Paul McCartney at Dodger Stadium last month and bought the tickets in November, and they were fucking ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, that's like a day out of Disney World, man.
I know, but exactly. I was like, but this is, you know, we don't, like I said, we don't have to do this, but we can do this.
Yeah, that's great.
Kids would probably rather see Ariana Grande and Post Malone, you know, but somewhere in them is going to be that they got to see 3 hours of a Beatle while he was alive.
Right.
At 77, and he brought out Ringo Starr for the encore at Dodger Stadium,
cool.
where they played in 1964. It was like,
that's really cool.
They're too young to appreciate the depth of that experience now, but to me it was like an investment that's going to compound with interest over the years, and one day they're going to look back when they're like 70 and go, holy shit, I got to see a Beatle, like, you know. And so like things like that, it's like making those investments of your time and doing quality things. I don't know, I think that's the other thing, like you become a little bit more introspective, where instead of it's all about like external, like give me fans raving about me and people wanting to take pictures of me and how do I look, it becomes more like, how do I feel? Like you become a little bit more like from the inside out instead of from the outside in. And it's like, I don't care if everybody in the world thinks I'm awesome. If I don't think I'm awesome, then fuck it.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think you get that when you're younger, or at least I didn't. I kind of looked for external you know,
validation from the outside.
validation. Yeah. Like, hey, what do you think about this? And that's like, if, you know, what does it matter if everyone loves what you do if you don't love what you do?
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
although I will say our song Bouncing Off the Walls is probably the reason I own a house. We fucking put on our record because we thought it was so bad. So what do we know? You know? So, but,
well, Marko, listen, man, thank you. This is just some good stories here. I like the I was just about to quit story, and then this and this happened. So that's really cool.
I hope it's cool, dude. I feel really bad because I feel like I went super deep on shit that has nothing to do with guitar, and then we didn't even get to talk about guitar.
Don't worry about it. That happens often. That, you know, that's the nature. This is a bio. It's a biographical show more than this is not a gear show. You know, it's a bio. People listen to this for self-development, inspiration, you know.
Well, that's cool. Well, hopefully they get something out of it. And, you know, you could have interviewed me 2 days ago or 2 days from now. It probably would have been a completely different story. So I just made it all up.
No, it's all good, man. Everything's good. Let me just mention to people that this is the 20th anniversary of Sugarcult. Will Sugarcult be playing? Will there be a new Sugarcult?
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But you can hit up Marko on Twitter at Sugarcult Marko and on Instagram at Marko DeSantis, and it's Marko and DeSantis DeSantis. And thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and then we have sugarcult.com still, and we Sugarcult Facebook page, you know, however you want to do it. We're usually pretty good about getting back to you, so if you ever want to like shoot us a message or something.
Yeah, invite them over the house for, you know.
Yeah, whatever. Man. I watch your kids for you, you know, fold your laundry, you know.
Do the lawn.
Change your guitar strings out. I will not do that. But I will say one other thing. I don't know if they have any left, so this might be like a huge disappointment, but the label that put out a lot of our stuff was Fearless Records. And if you go to their website, they just did Fearless for their 25-year anniversary. They took some of their flagship bands and did a limited edition colored vinyl releases.
That's cool.
They did a Sugarcult 7-inch. It's pink vinyl, and there's only like 1,000 of them maybe printed. So a pink vinyl with a sleeve, and it's got the acoustic version of our song Memory and then the studio version of Bouncing Off the Walls. So it's nothing you can't find on like Spotify or whatever, or Apple Music, but it's kind of a cool
you're a vinyl collector. Yeah, that's really cool.
Hold on one second. Let me show you.
Yeah. And so that's at Fearless Records.
I have a copy of it right here. So that's what it looks like.
Very cool. Very utilitarian looking.
And then, yes, it's just a spattered pink, like kind of looks like a crime scene. And then you've got, I feel like one of those girls doing like an unboxing video on.
It's like V8. What's that show? It's where you buy stuff on TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that looks really cool, actually.
Commercial. So there you go.
But wait, there's more. Order now, and we'll send you 2 Sugarcults for the price of 1.
These really good too.
Hey, man, thank you very much for everything.
All right, dude. Thanks a lot.
Everybody, if you enjoyed this, listening to this, please share it on your social media channels. We really appreciate your support. Check out what Marko's doing. Friend him on Twitter at Sugarcult Marko. Again, it's Marko with a K. And on Instagram, Marko DeSantis. Make sure you go to everyonelovesguitar.com. Sign up to get on our newsletter list so you and I can connect. And most important, here, this is your line, brother. Remember that happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice. And you get miniature Marko. Be nice. Go play a guitar and have fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody.
You guys, cheers.